My first question of you is, you grew up in Troy, Alabama, with a sharecropping family. What was it like growing up at that time?
You're right, I did grow up outside of Troy, Alabama, which is about 50 miles from Montgomery. My father was a sharecropper, a tenant farmer. But I remember in 1944, when I was 4 years old, when my father had saved $300 and a man sold him 110 acres of land. And we moved to this farm. And on this farm, we raised a lot of cotton and corn, peanuts, hogs, cows, and chickens. Mm-hmm. And on the farm, we all had responsibility. We all had to do something. And I fell in love with raising chickens. And it became my responsibility and my duty to care for these chickens. Mm. I didn't like going to the field, working out in the hot sun, picking cotton, gathering peanuts, pulling corn. And I would argue with my mother and father as a young child and said, this is hard work. And my mother would say, hard work never killed anybody. And I said, well, it's about to kill me. So some days when I would go off to school, I would get up early in the morning with my book bag and hide under the front porch and wait for the school bus to come up. Mm. And when I hear the school bus coming up the hill, I would ride out there and get on that bus and go off to school. But growing up there, I saw segregation and racial discrimination. When we visited the little town of Troy, I saw the signs that said white and colored. Mm. White men, white women, colored women, white waiting, colored waiting. And the schools was all segregated. Our school bus was old, ragged, broken down. We passed the white school and we see the little white children get on the new buses and enter into beautiful, well-painted schools. And I kept on asking my mother and my father, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents, why? They would say, that's the way it is. That's the way it is. Don't get in the way. Don't get in trouble. But in 1955, 15 years old in the 10th grade, I heard of Rosa Parks. I heard the words of Martin Luther King Jr. on the old radio. The action of Rosa Parks and the words of Martin Luther King Jr. inspired me to find a way to get in the way. And I got in the way. I met Rosa Parks in 1957 when I was 17. The next year I met Martin Luther King Jr. And I have not looked back since.
I'm sure you could see at that time that there was greatness going on there with Martin Luther King. Well, Congressman, what was it like being in the presence of Martin Luther King? And what actually did you do after meeting him?
After meeting with Martin Luther King Jr. in the spring of 1958, I made up my mind. I made a decision that I would do everything possible to end segregation and racial discrimination. During the month of February, when I was growing up and going to middle school and to junior high, to high school, we had to make what we call scrapbooks. It was called Negro History Week. It was not African American History Month. And we would cut out pictures out of magazines of famous and well-known African Americans like George Washington Carver, Booker T. Washington, Ralph Bunche, Marion Anderson. And these images inspired me. But to be in the presence of Martin Luther King Jr. changed me, it motivated me. He inspired me to stand up, to speak up, and to speak out. And as a student in Nashville, Tennessee, at American Baptist College and later at Fisk University, we started studying the way of peace, the way of love, the way of nonviolence, studying what Gandhi attempted to accomplish in South Africa and what he accomplished in India. We studied what Dr. King was all about. And from time to time, Martin Luther King Jr. would come to Nashville and speak, and he would inspire us. And we started sitting in. In the fall of 1959, we had what we call test sit-ins at segregated lunch counters, restaurants. And then when the students started sitting in North Carolina on a regular basis, we started sitting in. Black and white college students and some high school students would be sitting there on a stool, and someone would come up and spit on us, or put a lighted cigarette out in our hair or down our backs. And we heard that one day we may get arrested. And I wanted to look clean. I wanted to look what young people call today, I wanted to look fresh. So I went downtown to a used men's store and bought a suit. It was a used suit, and I paid only $5 for this suit. If I still had this suit today, I probably could sell it on eBay for much more money. But I got arrested, and I felt free. I felt liberated. I felt like I crossed over.
You got involved in the civil rights movement. You were involved in the sit-in movements, and which I'm integrally aware of. I was not directly involved in it, but we were very proud of what was happening down in the South. Did you feel any particular mission, if you will, there that this was going to be your lifelong work?
I felt my involvement in the civil rights movement was a calling. It was a mission. It was almost an obligation. I first came to Washington, D.C. in 1961, the same year President Barack Obama was born, to go on something called the Freedom Ride. Back in 1961, in Washington, D.C., black people and white people couldn't be seated together on a Greyhound bus or a Trailway bus, leaving the nation's capital to travel through Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. We were on our way to New Orleans to test a decision of the United States Supreme Court banning segregation and interstate travel. And the first incident occurred in Rock Hill, South Carolina. We were attacked by members of the Klan. We were beaten and left bloody. And the local police officials came up wanting to know whether we wanted to press charges. We said no. We believe in the way of peace, the way of love, the way of nonviolence. Several years later, one of the Klan's members who beat us came to my office. He was in his 70s. His son came with him. His son was in his 40s. And he said, Mr. Lewis, I'm one of the people that beat you during the Freedom Ride. I want to apologize. Will you forgive me? He started crying. His son started crying. I said, I forgive you. I accept your apology. They hugged me. I hugged them back, and I cried. During the spring and summer of 1961, more than 400 of us were arrested and jailed. We filled the city jail in Jackson, the county jail, and later they transported us to the state penitentiary in Parchman, Mississippi. But because of what we did and the action of President Kennedy and his brother, the Attorney General Robert Kennedy, those signs that said white waiting, colored waiting, white men, white women, colored women, those signs came tumbling down. And I said to young people today, those signs will only be seen today in museums, in a book, or on a video. They're gone, and they will not return.
What would you tell the young kids today to truly understand what it was like then, and where they are today and with the state of civil rights?
My message to young people today would be simple. Study the lesson of the civil rights movement. Read the literature. Watch the films. And be inspired to never give up or to give in. And when you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have a moral obligation to speak up, to speak out, and find a way to get in the way, to do something about it. And be hopeful, be optimistic, and never become bitter, and never hate, for hate is too heavy a burden to bear, as Dr. King stated. I would tell young people today that we're one people, that we're one family. We all live in the same house, not just the American house, but the world house. And that it doesn't matter whether we're black or white, Latino, Asian American, or Native American. The late A. Philip Randolph, who was born in Jacksonville, Florida, became a champion of civil rights, human rights, labor rights, workers' rights, if you want to call it. He used to say over and over again, maybe our foremothers and our forefathers all came to this land in different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. That we must look out for each other and care for each other.
As I mentioned to you, I'm involved with the Farm Credit Administration. What one or two pearls of wisdom could you share with me that would help me to improve the diversity within the agency?
I would suggest, as the Pope said when he spoke to a joint session of the Congress, that we all must continue to engage in dialogue. We must continue to reach out and talk to each other and never, ever give up on a single human being. During the days of the civil rights movement, the early part of the movement, we spoke a great deal about building the beloved community, a society that respected dignity and the worth of every human being. And I think in some of the agencies of the federal government and also in the Congress, we all got to learn to be a little more humane, just be a little more human and understand the pain, the suffering, the hurt of people, and lay down the burden of division, lay down the burden of separation.
Where do you see the future of the civil rights movement going forward?
As a movement, call it civil rights, human rights, to move toward a society that is free of bigotry, racism, we will get there. As a nation and as a people, we will get there. I'm very hopeful, very optimistic, because each generation must play a role. We all must play a part. And we get there, lay down the burdens that we are carrying. The American society, through the civil rights or human rights movement, can emerge as an example for the rest of the world. But we all must take the long, hard look and don't become impatient. I tell people all the time, pace yourself.
Thank you very much, there, Congressman, for your optimism. I feel blessed to have had the opportunity to spend this time with you.
But thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.